words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. So welcome everybody, those of you here and online. Glad to have you here on this beautiful June day. And happy birthday. This day, Pentecost, all those are bright red, beautiful color for the fire of the Spirit. We celebrate and reground ourselves in the day that the church was born. 2,000 years ago, a crowded day in Jerusalem, Shavuot, a festival day for the Judeans, a day when they celebrated and still celebrate Moses receiving the law from God at the burning bush on Sinai, a day when people came from all over, crowding the temple city, dozens of languages, as we heard so beautifully read today, rising and falling in the marketplace. Pentecost, meaning 50. 50 days since Jesus, the Son in and of the Trinity, was crucified, died, and was buried, and rose to spend 40 more days teaching his followers, appearing on the beach, appearing in the upper room, appearing on the road to Emmaus. And 10 days since Jesus, the human being, the enfleshed and risen human being, ascended and said his final goodbyes and promised the presence of the Paraclete, the Advocate, the Holy Spirit, God guiding God's mission in the world. It was one in many long days of persecution of Jesus's people, the Judeans. Days marked by frequent persecution, taxation, sickness, slavery, poverty, but also by community and celebration. This is the day the church was born. Born from God's mission of love and compassion in the world, born to be Christ's hands and ears and eyes and feet and heads and hearts in the world, to be always and everywhere in service to that mission, burning from that first day with the power of the Holy Spirit. It was not born on a day when a great cathedral was completed and its first service held. It was not born on a day when a great leader was selected to guide it. It was not born after a long strategic planning process in an orderly and considered manner, as much as the vestry in the room might like that to have been so. It was born in a rush of violent wind, with tongues of fire and a chaos of words spoken in a multitude of languages. It was born into a time of unrest and pain and sorrow and celebration and love and community. It was born into a time like this one. It came to life in diversity, lush, abundant, a little chaotic, and deeply communal. And our church, whether we like it or not, keeps getting reborn, reformed, reborn into the Spirit. Time and again, our church is challenged, reconfigured, reformed, reborn in a commitment to community, to diversity, to love, reverence, and care for one another. Recommitting each time to God's mission. The fact of the matter is the church was born for times just like these. Times when tragedy seems to meet us on every corner. Times when sickness looms over us. Times when poverty and exploitation are impossible to ignore. When despair casts its pall and tries to convince us that God, the Spirit, has no sway, that love is not enough. Times when we convince ourselves that we don't need church, The story of Pentecost is paired with the story of Babel. Also a time like this, but in a kind of different way. One language, the language of commerce, has begun to take over the world today, asserting authority and putting its name above all others. Our social media has captured us in information bubbles where we hear what we want to hear, separating us from others and drowning out diverse voices, creating algorithms that are of things and give us things that they know will open because we agree with them, addicting us to its images and its offers. I sure feel that way sometimes. Sometimes just want to throw away my phone and be free of it. And each of us out here trying to make a name for ourselves, for our church, our country, our political party. Many people look at the Tower of Babel, the story, as God's punishment for the people's arrogance. I see it a little bit differently. I see it as God's antidote to that drive towards oneness, towards uniformity, towards making a name, towards pride. It's God's urge towards diversity and health, away from monoculture. And we've seen what that's done to our land, to our earth, the monoculture, the monoagriculture. Away from order and safety that leaves no room for growth or relationship. It is in our diversity that we are the most vibrant and the most healthy. It is in diversity that we find compassion and care, reaching across difference to heal and to share empathy. So Pentecost was not so much God's answer to Babel, bringing us back to conformity or back together in oneness, as an affirmation of it. Think about it. It was not in one language that the apostles spoke the Spirit to the crowd. It was in many. It was not the language of the conquerors or of the market or even of the oppressed. It was the native languages, the languages each of those in the crowd had been born into, the language of their childhoods, their families, their loves, their pains, their sorrows and triumphs. I'm not bilingual, but speaking to people who are, it's their native language in which they find themselves speaking to family, in which they find themselves speaking words of love or care or sorrow, the language that touches their heart. These diverse languages of their hearts, it was into these that the message and mission of love was spoken. So how do we here at CGS, in all our diversity and growing diversity, commit ourselves again to God's mission? For as Bishop Rob, the Bishop of the Episcopal Church in New Hampshire, said recently, our church doesn't have a mission. Wait, what? Wait for it. God's mission has a church. This day, this Pentecost falls, as many of you know, on the first Sunday of Pride Month, a lovely testament to the power and spirit of diversity and love, despite so much desire to push it down. In light of this, I found myself drawn to the words of a Mexican poet, Francisco Alarcón, who writes out of a gay identity, a Latino identity, and has a strong connection to the deep, rich history of the Aztec people. In his poem, Prayer Oration, he writes, I want a God who hurts to the last bone and bites the air in pain, a jobless God, a striking God, a hungry God, a fugitive God, an exiled God, an enraged God, a God who longs from jail for a change in the order of things. I want a more God-like God? I think our answer this Pentecost lies in part in this poem, because this God that Alarcon longs for is our God, a God that longs to shake things up, a God who was human with us, who suffered, who understands, who honors and understands our messy and diverse selves. Yet all too often, the God we as churches seem to present to the world is an authoritarian God, punishing us, a God who expects perfection and wags a finger at disobedience. We, the church, Jesus followers, were born to be Christ's hands and ears and eyes and feet and heads and hearts in the world, to be always and everywhere in service to that mission, burning and burning still from that first day with the power of the Holy Spirit. So how will we embrace the diversity and abundance that God calls us to? What charisms, gifts of the Holy Spirit can we bring to the world this week as we go out from our worship, bringing God's mission to the world in moments of care and love? What burns in you? Where is the Spirit calling you, calling us? Is it to work with the unhoused, to celebrate diversity and love in the Nashua Pride Parade, to advocate for legislation and policy, to get out the vote, to work with the dying? Whatever it is, if it speaks to your heart, that is church. That it was what was born that day. Church is out there. We come here to remind us of that. It's out there, not just in here. Church, every Christian, is fuel for the fire of the Holy Spirit, burning unburned, moved by a powerful wind. It is in you and in me, in us, in everything that we do. God's mission has a church. We are that church. May the Holy Spirit inspire you to God's mission, to great love, to diversity, to compassion, and to courage.